Parables. Yeshua, or some call him Jesus, taught a lot in parables, and many seem to believe that that was a new form of teaching. It's not true. The rabbis taught through parables for many generations. The Jewish rabbis taught in many places the same as Yeshua did. They taught in synagogues, by rivers and lakes, in many places, and even in the streets. A parable is simply a story. It's a story that has a message or kind of a lesson in it. The story could change to fit the area, the time, or the circumstances at hand. This form of teaching has been used in Jewish homes for generations to teach children good actions, such as don't steal, don't lie, various things like that, little stories. And I think if you look at it, some of the stories type nursery rhyme things we have kind of comes from some of these. What is a parable? The Jewish word is mashal, and it has a wide range of meanings that include but aren't limited to a proverb, a riddle, a fable, or even an allegory. In the Greek, the word translated as parable is parabole, which means to cast alongside. It's used as a story illustration, using fictional representative words as an example. Yeshua was a rabbi, and like the rabbis of old, used stories to teach lessons. In a parable, one can transform a teaching into vivid images, and these help people to understand the point of the teacher. Yeshua used this type of teaching to drive home his messages about God and his relationship to us and to his kingdom. Yeshua took the story and used it by adding local color, such as language or events, to get his message across to the people, and they fully understood the method and what he was doing. David Stern, who is one of the foremost experts on rabbinic parables, says that the mashal, or the parable, represents the greatest effort to imagine God in all rabbinic literature. Over the generations, the rabbis talked about God in parables. When Yeshua taught this way, the people understood fully the teaching. New interpretations, especially those from a Western mindset, have distorted some of the parables. One should both look at the parables of Jesus and those of other rabbis over the generations to gain a full understanding of his teachings. One must understand from where Yeshua comes, the area of the world. His teachings and methods, and you will understand his teachings and methods fully when you understand the mindset of his era and area of the world and how they communicated. The Jewishness of Yeshua is completely related to his faith in the one God of Israel. Many times the faith in Yeshua fully overshadows his faith. He had a Jewish faith. The term Christian didn't come into being for years after his death and resurrection. By focusing all on the faith of Yeshua instead of Yeshua as the object of the faith is what we need. When we focus on Yeshua as our object of faith, it overwhelms his deep convictions and his own faith in the one true God. Yeshua was fully a religious Jew. Contrary to some people's ideas, as I said, he was not a Christian. He was a Jew. Christian came from a word that basically means the imitator of Christ. And I am proud to be called that, although I am also called a Messianic. That means I follow the Messiah. An example of one of Yeshua's parables matching some of those of rabbis is this one. Yeshua told a parable about just and unjust servants. So did the rabbis. This is one of a rabbi's parable. Rabbi Zachai said this may be compared to a king who summoned his servants to a banquet without appointing a time. The wise ones adorned themselves and sat at the door of the palace, for they said, "Is anything lacking in the royal palace?" The fools, on the other hand, went about their work, saying, "Can there be any banquet without preparations?" Suddenly the king desired the presence of his servants. The wise entered adorned, while the fools entered soiled. The king rejoiced at the wise, but was angry at the foolish. He ordered the wise to sit and eat and drink. However, to the fools, he let them stand and watch. This is similar to the parable that Yeshua told when he warned of the coming of the Son of Man in the story of the wedding feast. 5 of the 10 virgins were wise and prepared, and 5 of them were foolish and were not prepared and were locked out of the feast. Don't be one of the foolish servants. There will be many who will be locked out of the feast, and there will be many that God will say, "I never knew you." Don't be one of those. And learn to understand the scripture better by learning about the Jewish way of thinking and doing and everything from that era. Much of it is still in place today. Some of the same idioms of speech is still used in the Jewish world today that was used back then. If you know the base of his life and his training and upbringing, it'll help you better understand stories that you hear that sometimes don't quite make sense because you're thinking of it with a European or Western mind and looking at things as they are in our day today. Parables are very interesting ways of teaching people, and they work very well with children. That's why we do a lot of the children's stories we do. Stuff from Mother Goose and other writers of that type. It gets the message across because it makes it interesting to hear, and it's not just facts being rolled out. Oh, you shouldn't steal because it's bad, it hurts the other person, and it's not a good thing to do. You give them it in a storyline of a person who stole and what happened to them, and make it colorful, and they understand it, and they listen to it, and they remember it. And that's what you want when you're trying to teach a lesson to someone, you want them to remember what you're trying to tell them. You want them to remember the story. When they're tempted to do something wrong, they can remember the story. I still remember stories I was told when I was a small child that affected my choices in life during that period. And I still hear in my mind those stories being told when something is tempting me that is not good. When you use stories, you make it alive. It's not just something you're repeating. You can take an instance, something that happened a little while ago might fit a story that you're wanting to tell to teach a lesson. Use it in the story, as Jesus did, and always point everything to God and give Him your praise, your glory, your worship. Make use of the tools we've been given. You don't have to just stand and lecture at someone who's done something wrong. If you make a story out of it, it will come in and hit home, especially with children, a whole lot better than just lecturing at them. I know this is a short lesson, but I ask everyone to think about what they've heard here and remember, worship is not a once a week or twice a week event. It is daily. It is always, from morning till night, and even in your sleep. God bless you, and the Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach, bless you and keep you every day in every way.